Have you ever wondered if you've lived before or will live again? Are you curious about what happens to your soul after you die? Or maybe you've met someone you're sure you've known before. Or maybe you're just wondering if you have talents, skills, and experiences from a prior life that could help you now. Hi, I'm Brownell Landrum, author of the upcoming We Meet Again trilogy, and I'd like to welcome you to the Life is a Trip podcast. Following story comes from author J.G. McGrath. For his story, McGrath called upon his thoughts about what he would like to see at the end, something that would quickly and undeniably tell him that the end had come. Maybe something like the Grim Reaper, a void, and that light.
That Light by Jackson McGrath. Read by Erin Sterling. "Turn out that light," Harris moaned. It was too early to wake up. Or maybe it wasn't. Harris was retired. He wanted to sleep, so it was too early for that light. "It doesn't turn off," someone replied. "I don't want to think about what would happen if it did." Humor? Harris could take a joke, even tell a few with the right mood, but jokes were best after a cup of coffee, and not when that light was interrupting his sleep. He had lived alone since his wife had passed, so keeping that timeline shouldn't be difficult. That scratched at the back of his mind. Who was in his house to supply the humor? Why weren't those nice curtains he bought keeping out the morning sun? He couldn't feel his blankets or his bed under him, and while his memory wasn't the best, he couldn't remember getting into bed. The time for a nap was over. Harris opened an eye to find the humorous intruder. He didn't find them, but he did find that light. It wasn't the morning sun. It couldn't be this bright. That light in front of him was pure white, like the snow in childhood dreams. Nothing blocked it to create a shadow, and Harris somehow knew nothing could. At the same time, looking right at it didn't hurt his eye. That held true when he opened the other. It was when he had both eyes open that he noticed something at the edge of his vision. The enigma of that light could wait until he dealt with the intruder. His first glance at the intruder was promising. They were bone thin. His first good look at the intruder was confusing. They were actually bone. Standing before Harris was a skeleton in a suit, leaning on a shepherd's crook. Its skull was cocked to the side, like they might strike up a conversation at a bus stop. "Why?" Harris started the question without knowing where it would go. "Why are you in my house?" "We're not in your house," the skeleton's jaw wagged. "Not perceptually, at least." Despite the lack of a tongue, Harris was sure the voice came from the skeleton. It wasn't only male or female, but it was like a whole choir that had been mixed together to make one voice that kept the timbre of each one. It was a sweet sound, but it struck Harris like a beautiful painting in a burning house. The skeleton still had its empty sockets pointed on him. "Well, are you going?" "Going?" Harris's eyes dragged themselves back to that light. It wasn't warm or cool, but a chill went through his soul. "That light," he breathed, "is that—" "The light, yes," the skeleton nodded. "So, are you going?" "But Harris flapped his jaw until more than one syllable could come out. "That light can't be that. It's supposed to be at the end of a tunnel." The skeleton looked around. "How long does something need to be a tunnel?" Between that light and the dapper skeleton, Harris hadn't noticed any of his other surroundings. Below his feet was a solid void. Above his head was an infinite night sky devoid of any stars. Every other direction was a never-ending plain of perfect dark. It was an expanse beyond anything Harris had ever seen, and he couldn't say it wasn't a tunnel. Harris's jaw was flapping again. "But I can't be here. I'm healthy.
Okay, I haven't seen a doctor in a minute, but I'm active, I don't eat like crap, and I stopped smoking for God's sake.
But you did smoke for quite a while, the skeleton chided. That wasn't good for your heart.
My heart?
Heart attack. First one was the big one. Does that make you want to go? Harris put a hand to his chest. He couldn't feel a heartbeat there, but that wasn't a surprise. How often had he checked his pulse by putting his hand to his chest? Never. He needed to check his neck or wrist. He could do it now if he wanted to. Harris didn't test it and turned in the opposite direction of that light.
What's that way?
That way? The skeleton asked. Nothing.
Really? That's what you want me to think?
That's what there is. Harris set his jaw.
Well, why don't I give that a test?
He walked away straight-backed. He didn't bother to look back until he was sure that he had walked a mile away. When he finally looked back, the skeleton was right beside him, and that light was still just as close. I told you there was nothing that way, the skeleton said. Harris ran this time. He ran fast and hard, but his legs didn't get tired, his breathing didn't get heavy, and his heart didn't pound. It was only curiosity that made him look again. The skeleton and that light were just as close. Harris spun on them. Stop that! I'm not doing anything, the skeleton said. You were the one running into nothing, going nowhere. Do you want to try going the other way? Harris ignored the finger bones pointed toward that light.
Do you think this is funny?
No. Repetition drains the humor. Harris got so close he could see to the back of the skeleton's eye sockets.
The hell is that supposed to mean?
Everything has to go. Very few want to. Harris stayed in the skeleton's face bones with his chest puffed like he could change its brainless mind. The skeleton watched, unflinching and unchanging. Harris deflated.
I can't go. I have people I would be leaving behind.
Most people do, the skeleton said.
Not like this. I have a daughter, a son, grandkids. I can't leave them behind. My wife already passed. They would be all alone. You wouldn't do that to them, would you?
Would there be a good time to leave them behind? The skeleton asked. Was there a time you were expecting to go?
Well, no. But my grandkids are too young to lose another grandparent. There's family history I never wrote down. That would be lost to them. Just give me a few days to get it on paper, and then I'll... The skeleton wasn't interested in the end of that thought. It's not up to me. Harris's head twitched to that light. But that's just a light. It can't be right all of the time. The skeleton nodded. It is wrong from time to time. And what about this time? This isn't one of those times. Harris searched for another loophole, something else that he couldn't leave behind or leave undone. Each idea his mind cobbled together fell apart before it reached his tongue. He went through hundreds. When he looked to the skeleton again, he discovered that he had sunk to his knees. There's no going back, he said. Many have tried, the skeleton said. They don't make it back this far in. Harris was hugging himself. I don't even know what's in that light. Nothing does. So you won't tell me if it's my wife waiting for me, or endless fire, or nothing? Nothing includes me. I usher everything in, but I've never been inside. Harris was curled into a ball. Then you don't understand. You just stand next to it. You don't have to worry about it. I'll have to go someday. Harris was about to complain again, but forgot what he was going to say. He had to run through the skeleton's words one by one to make sure he had them right. Still,
They refused to be something he could understand. Finally, he uncurled to look at the skeleton.
What?
Everything has to go eventually, the skeleton said. I'll go last, but I will go. Harris was on his feet again.
And that doesn't bother you?
Did you ever know what would happen tomorrow? Harris was almost thrown down again by the question.
Well, no.
Did that bother you? Harris chewed on the next words.
It depended on what I thought would happen, but there were times that made me want to punch a wall.
Did that stop you from moving forward?
Time didn't really give me a choice.
This is the same, the skeleton said, tapping its chest. For everything. Harris looked over the skeleton's suit. It wasn't anything fancy, the suit of the average working Joe, not a CEO. Harris turned from the skeleton toward that light. Are you ready to go? The skeleton asked.
I guess I'm as ready as I'll ever be, Harris said. You get this done fast.
The visuals tend to help. Harris laughed, despite the lack of coffee.
So, how do I do this?
His shepherd pointed its crook toward that light. You just need to walk. Harris put one foot in front of the other. This time his position relative to that light changed. His vision changed from black nothing on all sides to only black at the edges, to nothing but white. He stopped at what he knew was the last step. Even this close, he could make out nothing beyond. Maybe his wife was on the other side. He nodded, kept his eyes open, and stepped into the light.
McGrath and the whole Life is a Trip group, thank you for listening to That Light on the Life is a Trip podcast. McGrath hasn't met that shepherd yet and currently lives in the Netherlands. If that is too far for you to look for him in person, you can still get in contact with him via his website, wordybeast.wordpress.com, or find him on social media under the name Wordy Beast. It's a great way to find strong opinions about AI in art and the art of writing. And a big thanks to the very talented Robin Roth for reading the story. Hi, this is Brownell. For more of these transcendental tales, please join the Life is a Trip group on Facebook and check out my amusing and enlightening story entitled The End, which you can find on my website, brownelllandrum.com. That's BROWNELLLANDRUM.com. And please look for my upcoming novel trilogy entitled We Meet Again. It's a story about a famous couple reincarnated today to help solve a centuries-old mystery that will change the world.